depends on where you're standing as to how much shade you're going to get from, for example, that 12-storey block that should be 8. But if you're talking about standing directly in the path of a 9+ storey building, well, that would be no different.
Also, with regard again to the general mass, etc., you are presuming you do see the necessity for this area to be developed. Why, if they went away and reduced parts of it, would you be, back to the levels of the EQDB? Would you be acceptable to that?
I think that would go a long way to helping, because I think we feel that the height and the overall mass is one of the biggest problems with this development. Our automatic response, which we've gotten used to saying for the other scheme, was absolutely want the empty site to be developed, but this is not the old post office. This is not an empty site. Some might say that this could continue. It doesn't necessarily have to be developed, but I think we've got a broad range of views on that. And certainly, a lot of people would say, yes, it would be a nice thing to see it redeveloped. And we are not philosophically against development. It is not a thing.
Sorry, can I make a quick point in addition? Your query of whether we would accept it if the building height was to be reduced to that in the Eden Quality Development Brief. Yes, that would be an important change to make. It would make the whole development a lot more acceptable, but I think we also have to consider the lack of affordable housing and contribution to the local amenities, and I think the developers would have to consider those very hard as well, and I would hope that the council would push on those before we would agree to say, yes, absolutely, we would accept it if you just reduced it in height.
Can you push a button? Hugh.
Thank you, Chair. Just a clarification, really. You made reference on the slide of list of objectives to GLA being one of those, and I can only find in the report one reference to the GLA, which is an objective, and there was another, I think it was, might be Tony, made reference to single aspect, north-facing housing of not being what they actually want. Again, I can't find any reference to that in the report. Could you clarify for me, please?
That was in the report that was on the meeting notes on the council website. I can take that out for you if you wish afterwards.
Okay, I think that's it from councillors. Okay, thank you very much. If you'd like to take your seats back. Does any councillor have questions? Yeah, okay. If you, British Land and the USS would like to come forward. I think we've got questions. I've got Malcolm, I've got David, G, and I've got Hugh so far. And should have said you've got up to 15 minutes. Oh, and Tricia as well. No, you just work.
I beg your pardon, I was just pointing out to you where the reference was from the GLA. It's on page 830.
Thank you, Tricia.
I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Tricia. Okay, right, we start off with Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions, but I'll share it out. I've got a group of questions on parking, so I'll just stick to that and then I'll pass over to us and come back to other questions if we've got time. It's on parking, and the report makes, I want to know, the report makes clear what the parking for residents is, and we can take a view on that, so I don't need to go into that. But it's first of all, a resident in one of the new flats, notwithstanding the fact that it's a town centre location, I would suggest that a good proportion of them, I don't know what proportion, will order goods and their weekly food shopping probably online. And where does the when they go online, what instructions do they leave, if you like, to the delivery company, to Ocado or Asda or whoever, as to how to get their goods? So it's just dropping off them.
There will be a residential concierge based in the Eden Crescent building, and that will be the delivery address for deliveries of that kind, and then there'll be a manned reception that will then have a storage room to take those deliveries, and people can come and collect at a later point in the day.
And so there's obviously going to be some drop-off parking for, given there's 380 flats, I don't know how many, there's going to be room for three vans to arrive at once or something like that, I don't know. Is that the case? Just for dropping off, and so they're going to stop there when it's 10 minutes.
Yes, there's a proposal to put a drop-off loading bay in the Neville House Yard area, which is actually close to where the M&S customer collector point is.
Thank you. The other one on parking is on disabled parking, and I've asked them together two linked questions. One of the new residents, hypothetical Aunt Ethel, comes down from Nottingham, and she's not a blue badge holder, but she's come down for the weekend, she's driven down, and she's of poor mobility, although she's not a blue badge holder. How does she park? And to widen that out, you can get on. There's 12 disabled parking spaces. So this is a relay. I know they're not directly the same. And the report mentions the shop mobility scheme in Eden Walk, but I thought that was going out. I misunderstood that. So could you just explain that, please?
Okay, so if I can take the shop mobility one first, because that's probably the easiest. At the moment, the shop mobility facility for Kingston is based in Eden Walk, in a relatively poor facility. There's a couple of porta cabins stacked on the roof of VHS. That is something that we provide the council rent-free, although the council run it. And what we have said, as part of this development, we will provide a new facility for the council, again rent-free, that the council will continue to run to offer that service. On the disabled parking point for residents, the 171 spaces that we've got down in the basement will probably not end up being sold with the flats. They will likely be available for rent. So some of those may be on an annual basis or on a monthly basis, or there probably will be parking available for visitors. And obviously there are, as you say, provision for disabled parking within that basement car park, and lifts providing direct access into the flats from that car park.
David Glasspool.
Yeah, just looking at some of the comments in this Cade review, that's a really sort of fundamental one about the routes. They mentioned the position of the southern route from the circus relates poorly to the wider movement routes and partially duplicates. You basically sort of kept, apart from Memorial Gardens, you've kept basically the same sort of alignments of going in and out of the area, rather than making a new connection into Ashdown Road and Brook Street. I was just wondering why you did that. Is that something to do with construction cost, or whether you considered doing it a different way in relation to that design comment?
I think this is probably a multifaceted answer, so I'll take a bit of the first bit and then I'll pass some of it to John. Again, it comes back to the fundamental point that Eden Walk is a retail scheme, and what we're trying to do is reinvigorate the retail offer of Kingston. And as you heard, what we're trying to do is offer more public realm than is currently existing in the existing centre. The public realm space in the centre will be 30% larger. Now, obviously, if we keep eroding the ground floor area by putting in additional routes, we lose the ability to create the retail floor space that is actually the primary driver behind the redevelopment. So that's part of it. And then
I was thinking, just to be clarified, that you wouldn't put in an additional route, it would be instead of the route that comes out where it currently does.
Okay, yeah. Well, so the reality is, at the moment, the retail space that is there is configured in a way that doesn't meet modern retail requirements. Fundamentally, the largest unit occupied by VHS at nearly 80,000 square feet has a very poor and narrow frontage for the quantum of space that VHS occupy. Obviously, I'm sure you will have all seen the news that VHS have recently looked to enter a CVA. So the future of VHS as a retailer is in doubt. So what we need to do is try and future-proof this site for retail, and trying to get to the point of the best configuration of the ground floor footprint for regular retail units that will address what current retailers are looking for is achieved by what we've proposed. And that has been gone multiple iterations of testing, and it also aligns with the Quarter Brief Master Plan, which doesn't show a route out through to Brook Street.
If I could just add, I'm John Adams at Deloitte Planning Consultants. When we evolved the street pattern of the scheme, we concluded that aligning the street that connects to Eden Street to the south, close to the United Reformed Church, rather than taking it through to towards the post office site, which I think is what Kay had in mind, would bring more benefits in picking up pedestrian flow from the Civic Quarter and also the southern end of the Apple Market and Market Square and Charter Quay. And we saw that as a really attractive design line, which the route could best pick up if it emerged by a new public space next to the church. And then the second benefit of that is that you create an enhanced setting for the United Reformed Church and an attractive south-facing public space. So those are quite important considerations in aligning the route as we have done.
Okay, I've got finished. Okay, Hugh, and then I've got Paul. I've got about 3 or 4 minutes left, so you might want to be quick. Okay, Paul, straight to you.
Okay, I'll keep it to a quick one. I'm not too sure if I read about is there any zip car or that type of car facility going to be in the scheme?
Yes, we have got provisions for spaces, and that will be included in Section 106.
How many, please?
Just one space. We've been to Zipcar and others, and it's mainly about the number of spaces that they can support within the car park, and they've said that they would only want one space.
David Cunningham?
Yes, very quickly. You mentioned, obviously, a cinema. What guarantee would we have that you will have a suitable operator and this will go ahead and this is a viable element of the development?
We have a letter we can share with you from Everyman Cinemas.
Can I say who they are?
They're one of the best-known operators of boutique cinemas in that market.
Okay, thank you. Tricia?
Right, a very quick point. Based on play space, because the London plan states that anything that includes housing should have sufficient play space, and it would seem to be lacking. I'm particularly interested in this, given that the madness of having free schools in office buildings and things like that. So where's the quality area for children who are living in a development such as this, as part of this?
Yes, we do have play space on site. I'll pass that to Gregory.
The way in which we develop each of the buildings has its own private courtyard space or terrace level. For example, Union Terrace building, the inner courtyard has its own play space, and it's in accordance with the London plan. The Eden Crescent building, the podium level on the southern side, which has a slight overlook onto the dining terrace, has play space, again in accordance with the London plan for the number of residents in that building. And then similarly in the Union Terrace, the Neville Yard building, on the 8th level, it also has the Winter Garden, which has the equivalent amount of play space.
Okay, thank you. I think we're out of time on that, so thank you for your efforts. And if you'd like to retire, I now throw the floor open to questions for officers.
This is Chair, just let us make a point that we have these pre-decision meetings, and I mean, it's a massive application, and we're limited to a time for questions, which doesn't. I know I asked a question. I did have one about other questions, but not every member has the opportunity to ask a question. We just think it's.
That's the system we've got at the moment. Anyway, it's now questions to responses. So, Bill, to start with.
Good evening, Nick. I've got some questions. I don't necessarily want answers now, but certainly if we could have clarification for the decision making, because there are a number of issues that are unclear. The first is density on page A48. I'm slightly confused on what basis the density calculation is done, which shows a higher density than the second approach, which is the residential site area only. If you could clarify that in the final report, and perhaps put it in tabular form, so we can see on one bit of the table what the London Plan Sustainable Density Matrix suggests, and then what it is on the two bases, and what your site area is. Don't answer now, but it's unclear to me at the moment. The second point is, given the importance of the precise wording for the NPPF, on page A27 it says, Historic England said the proposal would have a major impact on the setting. Could you please clarify with Historic England and get them to say whether or not this is substantial harm in NPPF terms? You get the point?
No, I get the point, and we have already clarified that with Historic England, and so I'll set that out in the report to you.
Did you? Right.
Yes, you will. You said you will.
Oh, you will. Thanks. Sorry, I was a little bit. The other point is a lot of comments on the guide, the Eden Quarter Development Brief Height Guide. The Kingston Residents Alliance produced a tabulation. Could you confirm or deny that that's correct, and perhaps do an overlay on the developers' proposals, the heights they're proposing and how that relates to the Eden Quarter Development Brief? Particularly in the Crescent area, is that at the highest point, or does that dip down?
I think there is going to be a lot greater detail in the main report of the heights of the different buildings, and I don't necessarily think a table is the best way to demonstrate that.
No,
but that will be addressed in the report in terms of what policy is, what the Eden Quarter Development Brief states, what residents have raised in their objection, and also officers' views on those heights.
Thanks, Nicholas. And the final point is, in the final report, can we have a full dwelling mix, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we go on to Malcolm, I've been notified that at least one ward councillor wishes to speak, which I think is John. Would you like to come forward? Is the committee happy for John to speak? I thought you would be. John, please step forward. You know what I'm going to say to you? Accuracy, brevity, clarity, and all that. Sorry? Okay. And no catchphrases there, please. Carry on.
I don't know if I've got anything left. Thanks, Chair. I live and work in Eden Street, and where I eat my dinner is closer to this development than my own backyard, so I'm fully concerned with what's going on. I think there is a need to give life to that area, and there's a need to make it a bit more what we should be having in 2016. Generally, I think the public consultations have been good, and I think there has been engagement with the local people, and I do like and welcome the ideas of the commitment to local employment and local businesses getting in there for community space and profit share. But there are genuine concerns, and those concerns can include the density and scale, the height, the design, the impact on heritage, the supporting infrastructure, and one thing that hasn't been mentioned so far tonight is the worries about what happens to Kingston's homeless people, and we need to discuss that maybe away from this meeting. And I would say that whilst the number of objections is quite high, I think it might be higher if we weren't overcome with development, fatigue. We've had a lot of dealings with the old post office, and even for people around here, still the talk of toll towers and toll jump. It all comes in, and it's quite hard to sort of see one from another. Over the last year, I've come not to trust developers, and rightly or wrongly, that's sort of where I sit, and so I've had to ask a lot of questions. And in their defence, this proposal, they always do try and give us an answer. It might not be answers that everyone will welcome, but I think it's good, and it needs to be recognised that they are there to feed back. One of my main criticisms with most of the developments that are being talked about at the moment is the lack of affordable housing. And continually, the response we're given is that it doesn't work in this one because it's not viable, and the figures don't work. And we're told to trust the viability assessments. But in this case, there has been full transparency on the viability assessments, and I think that that's something that we should welcome, and that's the one thing I want to try and get across tonight, that this is good, and it'd be really good if we could have public commitment from developers tonight to, if this development evolves or grows in any way, that we can keep with this transparency on these viability assessments. And also, as a group of members, try and encourage this to other developments that are not present tonight, but as a general rule, I think this is a good point, and others have spoken very eloquently about the pros and cons of this, and I'm sure you've heard it all before, so I don't need to go through that, but the viability assessment's been transparent is something that I welcome. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, thank you, John. If you any questions of John? No, I think you're off the hook. Okay, I've got Malcolm, and then Tricia.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask about the inclusive development brief, but Bill's asking that, and Nick is coming back to me on that. And a question I wanted to ask the developers, so I'll try and slip it in if I can by asking the officer, but if you don't feel it's not, I think I can frame it as a question. With the central atrium, or what is that what you call it? The central courtyard. Thank you very much. The central courtyard. I'll be honest, I can't get me, I suppose I'm making a comment, but I actually can't get my head around what this glass thing round the entrance to the downstairs bit, whether that's going to obscure it for you, because the applicant spoke about holding, if you like, not public events as such, but having small public displays there. And I can't get my head around how it works with this glass. You know what I'm talking about, the glass thing in the middle.
Yeah.
Which might be really good. And I think so one bit of me says, this is brilliant, this is really good, I really like it. And another bit of me says, well, if that's plonked in the middle, that's going to spoil the idea of people sitting down and watching, some buster or whatever going on. So, have the officers considered that? And I mean,
so the question is, have the officers considered whether the glass structure in the central square obscures views? That's the question. Yes, officers have considered that in their deliberation.
Yeah, I have to say I echo the audience and.
But Chair, you'll understand that tonight is not for comment from officers, it's for answering factual questions.
Okay. Right, okay.
Could we have I think it would be useful next time if we could have a bit. I've seen all the graphics and the visuals, but I'd like to see a visual of someone sitting down on one of the benches down there and how that relates to this glass structure. That might help.
We'll have a look and see what we can do about that. Yeah, okay. Sorry, Malcolm, are you done? Tricia?
I'm I've got a slight query. Maybe it's just me coming fairly late to this process. On page A63, paragraph 205, it talks about the viability assessment. And if you go back to page A28, the final comment with regard to housing says, Housing Services awaits the financial appraisal from the applicant and it cannot support this application at the present time. And I'm wondering quite how that comment squares with what's said in paragraph 205 on A63, where it talks about the application has been independently assessed. It doesn't actually describe the outcome, whether or not that would satisfy the fact that Housing Services say they can't support the application.
The comment from Housing in the comment section from all of the different consultees, that was their comment at the outset of the application, and to date we have received no further response from the Housing team as to that. Again, because this report is a factual report, there is not comments from individual officers on individual elements. That is in the next report. But obviously it hasn't been independently assessed by our housing team. It's been independently assessed by consultants appointed by the council who are specialists in this matter, because our housing team aren't specialists in viability assessments.
Sure. One thing, just before you go on, Tricia, just so you know, we have had the offer. Do you want to push your button for a second? I'll let you come back in. We have made the offer to actually look at the viability assessment, which was shared with us, very much open book. And I know, obviously, you're in alternate, so you weren't aware of that, but that was made available to all councillors on this committee, and we have seen it, and we've looked at it. So please carry on.
And I was aware that that had happened, but was it also made available to Housing so that they could comment further? Because it is, you know, they are a statutory consultee after all, and this is a very critical part of one of the pressures that's actually on the borough, not just here in Kingston Town, but across the whole borough, is the issue of affordable housing. So it'd be interesting to know what response they've made, and if they haven't made one yet, if there could be one included in the papers that we get when it comes to committee.
Yes, I mean, I have spoken at length to the officer in housing about this scheme, and so she's fully aware of all the details that we've made available to members, and we are awaiting their final response, which will be in the final report.
I've got Rebecca, then I've got David Glasspool. Rebecca first.
The CAVE report, will the submitted plans, the current plans, be presented to them and then their comments be given back to us before the 23rd of March?
No, because the in terms of how design reviews work, they are either carried out prior to an application being submitted, which is actually the preference, so that they can inform the design rather than being carried out as part of the application. CAVE have given their view on the scheme, and as we've set out in the report, that is one of the many views that we have to take into account as part of the consideration of the application. But no, a second effectively round of design review with CAVE was never envisaged as part of this application.
On the new central space, so I guess the question is a bit more specific than that. So the space between the seats and the glass atrium, I think that's what it's called. When I was looking at the pictures, I was concerned that if you're sitting there with a buggy, which some of us do, and then you're also walking past with a buggy, again, which some of us do, would there be space practically, and do you look at that side of things, like how the public area actually works in terms of those kind of practical thoughts?
Yes, that's what our urban designers look at in terms of the usability of those spaces, and the GLA look at that as well in terms of the quality of the public space. And as a mother of twins with a double buggy, I too know the importance of having adequate space to manoeuvre around structures. So it is one of the things that we do look at to ensure that public realm isn't over-cluttered. You need seating, you need landscaping, need other structures, but you also need to be able to move around. So that is looked at by a number of different officers as part of the proposal.
Yeah. I've got David Glasswall and I've got Hugh.
Yeah, thanks. I was going to mention the same point as Bill, that you're going to cover that and how that all fits in, so that's good. Maybe I missed it because I was an alternate, but there's sunlight information which has been referred to. We had the winter information, but the objectors were referring to the summer information. Maybe I've missed it somewhere. Do we get that in the final report?
More information will be available in the final report.
Okay, I didn't see it here. And then maybe something I was going to ask the applicants, but maybe you could interpret this. There's all this funny language that designers use. This is about the imposing wall onto Eden Street. It says a more successful approach would be to create individual buildings whose verticality is expressed more clearly. Can you interpret that for me? Does that mean individual buildings, which we go right down to ground level and then a separation? Because that obviously would impact the residential, the retail stuff.
This is taken from the cave response.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get some interpretation of what that means.
Yes, what CABE's view of the scheme was that, in their view, there should be one tall building that hits the ground as completely separate on its own, with then other buildings adjacent to it. So that interpretation is correct.
Okay, I'm just trying to imagine it. But then there would be a separation between the buildings with passageways between them or something.
CABE didn't go into the detail of effectively how they would design the scheme, but that is what they mean by that. They were talking about an actual complete separation in a sort of a standalone building in its own right.
Hugh and Paul.
Just a quick one. It's obviously a big scheme. There's lots of different design elements to it. And whilst we've got lots of CGI stuff, is there a materials palette we can have sight of on the day, and a bit more detail for questions on specific parts of each bit?
Yes, we have actually got a palette of materials for the three separate buildings.
How do we relate? Okay, so each bit we can relate it back to these things to see what the dark brown bit is, for example.
Okay, and I've got Paul.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to know, maybe I should know this, but is the EQDB a policy or is it an advisory document?
It's not policy, it's supplementary planning guidance.
Okay, so that's it. Do I have any more questions? I think we've exhausted it. Okay. In which case, thank you very much for this evening, everybody. I'll wrap up the meeting then, as there's no further questions. I have no urgent items from the chair. Just to remind you that the decision-making is intended for the 23rd of March. Everybody is welcome, hopefully without the sort of Bastille-like approach on the front door, which I did try and get changed. However, thank you very much for this evening. I've closed the meeting at 5 minutes past 9. Thank you.